Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok? Which one are you getting off of? Oh, and for you, because I know you guys use it. I don't use it, but Pinterest.
I'm not getting rid of Pinterest.
I'm getting rid of Fable.
Fable?
Sorry, Facebook.
Oh.
Sorry.
I said, what's that one?
Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, or Pinterest?
TikTok.
I would say TikTok too, honestly.
I would say TikTok just because it sucks all
Okay,
of
well
my
then delete it
time.
off y'all's phone right now.
I will.
Maybe she ain't even on it. Go ahead and look.
Y'all
ahead
like
and look.
Facebook that much?
I just made a TikTok account.
She really did,
And
like,
it's
legit.
just to see y'all stuff.
Oh, yeah.
What y'all doing with Facebook? Looking at
Looking
everybody's
at-
business.
So here's my thing with Facebook. I have too many people that I would never talk to again if I got rid of Facebook. You know?
That's real.
I mean, yeah, that's fair.
And like it's people. Maybe one day I will want to talk to them again.
and I have Messenger.
But right now,
I will say, like, when you need to do research on somebody, like, Facebook is really the way to go.
True.
Where did they go to school? How old are y'all?
I'll
Tag
say,
tag photos.
yeah, or who's
Yeah.
mutual friends with them. I'll say, though, with Instagram, you can do the reels. I know it's not as good, but if they
Tell her
took
that.
TikTok away, then everybody would be forced to do reels.
But the Instagram algorithm is so different. And Instagram doesn't do well with long form content. I'll watch an 8-minute video on TikTok.
But don't you think if we were forced to, they would have to adapt?
YouTube
Probably,
Shorts.
yeah, at that point, I think people would start migrating back to YouTube, watching people's longer content.
Yeah, that's valid.
Reels to me is like when I want to laugh.
For like 5 seconds.
TikTok is like all of it. I like Reels. It's just different. They don't. TikTok and Reels aren't the same to me.
Are y'all all fasting social media right now?
Yes.
Oh, it's so sad. Why did this
I
last
never
week
laugh.
suck so hard?
That's the thing
Because I can't
is-
disassociate on
I
social
know,
media right now.
That's so real. Like when you're dealing with heavy stuff. And you're
What a
like,
great
just want to
segue.
scroll. I'm like, gosh, am I okay? I'm unwell.
Literally.
You realize how much you use it just to numb.
So we do 21 days of prayer and fasting at the beginning of every year. And so that's what we're doing as a church right now. And so when the Lord told me he wanted me to do a soul fast, he was like, fast TV. And I know myself, I would, instead of spending that time in the word or in prayer as you're supposed to draw nearer to God, I would do social media instead. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to take it out too. So I'm not even tempted.
Yeah.
Do y'all feel like, because we're 1 week into the fast, do y'all feel like y'all have seen anything like, or has anything come up? Like, has God been speaking around any certain things within like starting the fast?
I would say for me, yes, actually a lot. I've heard him clear on a lot of things, but I feel like it's been like I was texting Ciarra earlier this week that the fast itself felt easy, but then like yesterday I was like, okay, now that I'm a week in, like actually how does it feel? And it feels still easy, like as far as the action of not doing things, but like emotionally it's been like one of the harder weeks that I've had in a long time.
That's so interesting because I also wanted to do like fast of some sort of food. So I was doing sweets as well. And I have a huge sweet tooth, so that's super hard for me, okay? But after the very first day of the fast, I was like, I feel like TV's good enough. Like, what if I just didn't do the sweets?
Bro.
And I happened to have a group that day, and they were teaching on the characteristics of God. And, of course, the fruit of the spirits came up, and one of them being self-control. And she said something that literally rang in my spirit. Because seriously, I was really debating, like, maybe I'm doing too much, you know? And she said that faithfulness, patience, and self-control are the 3 fruit of the spirits that you grow in as you exercise it. And so everyone's like, oh, I wish I had faith like you, or I don't have self-control. No, you actually do. Even in the Bible, it says like each person is giving a certain amount of faith accounted to them. And then as you exercise it, then it grows. And so I like went down in my chair and I was like, okay, I need to exercise this self-control and not have the sweets.
See, I always think self-control is so interesting because when I think of self-control, I usually think of it in regard to like purity. But I'm seeing in my own life where self-control is genuinely the one I need to grow in. And I don't feel like I think about it very often, but I feel like that's something I've been working in this last week. Not even this last week, it's been months, but I'm like it's more aware to me in this last week. And I was literally just telling Hailey at church today, I'm like, I feel like my emotions are, it's not even the emotions all over the place. It's like when an emotion spikes or like comes up, I'm all over the place.
Yeah.
And I lack a little bit of self-control in that area. Like, I wouldn't say really I'm reactive, but I feel like out of nowhere these last few months.
She says that I'm not reactive because I'm reactive.
No, I'm saying that because when I get angry lately, which is so much more frequently because I didn't really grow up feeling like an angry person. I didn't harbor a lot of anger, but if I did, it always came out in like I was really quiet, or I would be if anybody got like what's the saying? Hard end of the stick? Mm-hmm. Short end of the stick.
Bro.
Don't cut that mug out. That's funny. Like the hard end?
Leave it there. Leave it there. Leave it there.
I'm so sorry.
If anybody got the short end of the stick.
Yeah. If anybody got the short end of the stick, as I was a child or a teenager with my parents, because they just got my attitude. I had a bad attitude. But I would talk about that with my stepmom because I'm like, why was I like that? And she was like, I could understand as you were growing up, you were dealing with a lot of hurt and a lot of disappointment. Mm-hmm. And I could tell you were just disrespectful to me because it's not because you were a bad kid, but because you had so much hurt and disappointment that you were carrying. She was like, but sometimes you just needed a whooping. I was just telling Ciarra that yesterday because I was like, yeah, I was bad. I wasn't bad, sorry. I had a bad attitude. Anyway, I wouldn't have said like, oh, I deal with a lot of anger, but my whole life, I've never felt comfortable with anger. Mm. So I learned how to bottle it up. And then somebody would eventually get the short end of the stick. Yeah. Because it would build up for so long that I would just, I would just unleash it on, usually my brothers or my family. Once I got older, like I'm talking my 20s, I feel like I got good at it because I started learning how to just have healthy confrontation and to discuss things that were causing anger or sadness. Anger was masking. But now I think when Trey passed away, I feel like that unlocked a different level of anger. So right now I would say like I'm dealing with anger in places that I've never seen it seep into before. Yeah. And not only that, but how I would normally cope with anger or handle the anger, it's like it's flown out the door. Like those measures don't work. When the anger comes in, that is gone. Like it feels like I'm working in a different part of my brain lately when I'm angry. So even the other day we were somewhere and someone made like a joke and it was a lighthearted joke, but it made me so mad. I really thought I could flip the table. And normally I wouldn't think that. I'd be like, I'm going home. I want to cry, but I was so angry. I felt like I had the power to lift that table. But it's interesting because I think of self-control in regard to anger. And even today we talked with a friend and she was talking about how, anger is a secondary emotion. So mad is really kind of covering a sad.
That is so me.
Yes. And I think that's the part that's hard is even though the anger is uncomfortable, but so is sitting in the other stuff.
Yeah.
So you don't want to. Mm-hmm. So you're like, well, I'd rather just be angry. Hearing you talk about self-control, I realize when it comes to our emotions, like self-control, yeah, like if you're feeling anxious, peace might be the opposite. But a lot of it is like, okay, well, what's the opposite of anger? But maybe it is learning how to rest in self-control and knowing how, yes, I can feel this emotion. Where am I taking this emotion? I feel like in the fast, I've seen a lot, and I feel like God has spoke really clearly And I feel like I've been on cloud 9. But then there's those other layers that when you really sit, you're like, oh, I don't want to touch that.
Yeah.
Like it's just sitting there and it festers, and there are days where it gets poked, and I'm like, probably should have dealt with that, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm thinking, I don't have a final thought on that. I'm just thinking about how self-control comes into play with our emotions.
It's hard.
Yeah.
I feel like when you're talking about anger, for me, that is my default emotion a lot of times is like, oh, I'm feeling depressed, I'm angry. Oh, I'm feeling sad, I'm angry. I'm hurt, I'm angry. I'm inadequate, I'm angry. Like, it doesn't matter what the emotion is, I'm going to try and make it anger because I can cope with anger. I can feel anger and I can just be like, I'm angry and move on from anger. And it, like you said, it's easier than being like, oh, I feel inadequate. Why is it that I feel inadequate? Like, let me sit with that thought and dissect it instead of just being like, nope, I'm angry. No one talked to me. Like, I'll get over it in like 5 minutes or an hour. Like, I just need some space. But for me, that's like the go-to emotion that I have. And I have felt myself this past week being more angry because it's easier, because sitting with the Lord and fasting and doing all of these things is bringing up things in me that I don't want to sit with, I guess, is like, for lack of a better way of describing it. And this Friday I had I don't know, maybe I did have self-control, maybe I didn't. But this woman like provoked me. I took my kids to this play place and she was holding the door open for us, and I was like halfway through the door and she said, "Not even a thank you, you're disgraceful." And I was like trying to get my kids through the door. So I'm talking to them like, "Come on, go, go, go." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." So I apologize. We go in to use the restroom because we had just left. I buckled them all in the car. We were about to pull out when my son said he needed to go to the bathroom. And it was not one that could just go in the little potty in our car. And it was not one that he could hold for 20 minutes till we made it to our next stop. So we all unbuckled and we all went back inside. And I was in a hurry. And so then when I was in the bathroom, I'm processing the interaction I just had with this woman. And I was like, no, I'm going to go apologize again. I want her to know, like, I'm not disgraceful. That's not my character to like not say thank you. And then I approached her again and she basically like went off on me that she hates entitled people like me and that I'm a terrible example for my children. And I was so mad. And I just was like, "I'm sorry. I hope you have a good day." We left. And then I walked outside and immediately punched an electrical box that was in front of the building. And I was so mad and I was embarrassed because it was in front of my kids, in front of my friends, in front of anybody, honestly. But I was like, yeah, maybe I am a bad example. But then I was like, well, maybe at least it wasn't her face, because I was so mad. I wanted to like legitimately hurt this stranger. But when I sat with it, it was like, why was I angry? Why was that my default? And I felt like the Lord was showing me like the anger was the response that I had to the feeling of like being inadequate. And the fact that she called me disgraceful immediately was like a word that I've used about myself. And so it was really hard to have self-control in that situation, because it was like another person was triggering something, a negative thought that I already have about myself. And so the self-control, I feel like it's harder in those situations than like if you just were like, okay, I'm going to walk into whatever situation I know I can exercise self-control. It's like when you're caught off guard like that, it's so much harder to have any kind of like cohesive thought at all. And nonetheless, like, oh, I'm angry because this is an internal struggle of mine,
I love how you gave yourself grace, though, because it is something that you already did struggle with, and so you're acknowledging that. I also want to remind you to give yourself grace, though, because what you're talking about is you haven't always dealt with this type of anger boiling up. Well, you're literally walking in uncharted territories for yourself.
Yeah.
So it's like you're relearning how to have self-control in the things you're going through right now. So I would say, oh my gosh, I used to be so good at this. No, like you're literally learning how to do it right now. So there's grace. Yeah, you're welcome.
Well, even as you were talking, it made me think of some of the situations that have been the most triggering. Some of them, or they're all surrounded around a similar trauma, but also it feels like they're validating a belief that I already have about myself or about my life or situations. And so, yeah, you're like, I already hate this. Thank you. Thank you for pointing it out.
Yeah. Stranger
Even
lady.
sometimes unknowingly, people don't, realize. But either way, I think it's up to me to allow that emotion of anger to either drive the car or
get out.
sit in, or get out.
Yeah, or maybe sit for a second.
In the
I
back
feel
seat.
like it's healthy sometimes to have anger, right? Like
I agree. I mean, I think
righteous anger.
when I think just naturally we're human beings in a world like that we're in, so we're going to experience anger. It's just like offense, like what Pastor Brian always says, offense is going to come, like, but you get to choose if you're going to pick it up.
Yeah.
And even yesterday I was thinking about anger, and I felt like God reminded me of that. Like, there's going to be more than millions of times in your life where you can be angry, and you can feel that emotion and bring it to me. But what do you do with it after? Like, do you put it in your bag and you take it with you, or do you lay it at my feet? And I'm like, yeah, I keep putting it back in the bag. Like,
that's the problem.
that's the problem is like, I keep putting it, okay, I bring it to you, and then I'm like, thank you, like, and.
Well, it's almost like, even, I know for me, like I say my anger, like I've taken ownership of that boy. It's like one of my kids. I'm like...
And yet in the same
I need
way,
to be like, it's not mine.
I claim it as mine, but I feel this guilt carrying it. And so it's just like my body, even, and my mind is like, girl, where are we? What are we doing? Which one do you want?
Yeah.
I do think, though, because it's something I've been talking about more often in counseling, and I do think that's helping me understand, like we talked about, what's underneath this anger. Yes, it's coming up as anger, but what do you feel like you were let down in? What do you feel like is disappointed you? What do you know what I mean? When you really sit with it, you're like, oh God, this is worse.
It's way worse.
But it's what we talked about.
Way worse initially.
Yes.
But way better after the fact.
Yes, because you can't heal from something that you're not allowing yourself to feel. And if you don't let yourself get to that root, you just keep snipping the weed, and the root's like, here I come again.
Right.
Like, I'm sprouting again eventually, and it may not be the grief, but something's going to trigger it in a year. Something's going to trigger it in 3 months.
Yep.
And it's what we talked about in the last episode. Like, we're so quick to sweep things under the rug.
When if you don't deal with that too, then it begins to affect your life in general. And I realized it in a new way this week. I was working on something that the Lord had put on my heart, and I had been working on it, and I've never felt this way, but it literally felt like I was staring at a blank wall. Like nothing was coming to me. And I could feel like there was something like blocking. Like I just didn't know what it was. And then I tried to journal with the Lord, and I got nothing again. And then that Sunday, I went to church, and our pastor was talking, and he said, deal with the root before you deal with the harvest. And he was talking about a temptation. And I was like, and my spirit like just lit up with that phrase, like deal with the root before you deal with the harvest. And I was like, okay, so I have a root somewhere, but I honestly had no idea where to look or what, because honestly, I feel like I got rid of the shame. I got rid of all the things, but clearly something was still there. And so I prayed, and I asked the Lord, like, what is the root? What do I need to deal with that I'm avoiding? What am I hiding? Whatever it may be, right? And the only thing that I felt like the Lord showed me was it was like a rock hitting a windshield. And this was prophetically, like, imagining that did not happen in real life. And I felt like he was saying that something small. It starts off as something small, but if you don't deal with it now, it could affect your vision in the future. And so it was blocking where he was trying to take me, what he was calling me to do. And so I try to sit in it, and I guess it was my mind was so clouded, I knew I couldn't do it on my own in that moment. And so luckily, I have this prayer group that I like to go to, and I went to this prayer group, and I just asked them, like, hey, can y'all pray for me? Like, I feel like I have a root that I honestly don't know what it is, and so I really can't tell you anything about it, but if y'all could pray with me that I get clarity for it. Mm-hmm. And they were like, well, what are you struggling with? And I said, no. I said, so I just wanted prayer. I didn't want to tell you what the details were, right? And then I got convicted right there in that moment. And he's like, you're asking for freedom, but you're too scared to tell anyone. And I said, oh, okay. And I told you guys, y'all my safe space, but he literally called me to that group to get prayer. Yeah. And so in that moment, I had to decide if I really wanted freedom or if I wanted to keep my pride.
Right.
And so I decided freedom.
Make that a reel.
Yeah.
Just that sentence is a reel.
Yeah. Say it again. What'd you say?
I don't remember now.
You just said I had to decide if I wanted my freedom or my pride.
We're going to circle back to that.
Yeah.
Circle back.
So I decided I wanted freedom more than I wanted my pride. And so I sat there and I told them the story, and they all looked at me like, girl, you did not do, like, you are guilting your own self. Like, what you did is not bad. Mm-hmm. And they were just affirming me that you are in this, like, tailspin of lies right now. And they were able to call me out of it. And so they started to pray, and they were like, I don't think that you have like a root of why you fell into this temptation. I think your root is that you have a fear of disappointment. And I said, oh. And she said, the fear of disappointment is what's causing you to feel this guilt. And then that's causing you to feel this shame. And so when I broke off shame originally for stumbling into this temptation, it didn't break off the root. And so the shame, it went in that moment, but I still had to deal with it once I left whatever area I was in. And so deep down, that root became in every area of my life. Luckily, it wasn't that long, but I couldn't do this assignment that God gave me because now I'm fearing I'm disappointing you. And they said, when you let that root get back in your system, then it's going to begin to affect every aspect. She's like, in your mind, it's like, oh, I wasn't perfect, so I failed God. And she said, there's a slim line between living perfectly and living righteously. And she said, God never called you to perfection. And I said, oh, thank you, Lord, that we don't have to be perfect. Yeah. And so when they were speaking into me, they said that when you put your standard of you have to be perfect in everything, then you are literally walking in your own strength. Now you're trying to earn what he has for you. And I was like, oh my goodness. And it goes back to, I always see like a swing when I see it, but it's when I'm in the highs with the Lord, it feels like I have his favor. It feels like everything's going well. He can use me in mighty ways. He can do big things in my life. I can pray bold prayers. But when I'm in the low, I struggle with, did I lose your favor? Can I hear your voice? You know? And so it was just like this flip of like, no, you love me just because I'm your daughter. Yeah. You have favor on me just because I'm yours. It was never anything I did. And so when they prayed that root off of me, I'm not even kidding. I voice memoed her like a 10-minute voice memo of the freedom I felt though. I was like, oh my gosh, guess what God did? And I was like, it was so amazing. But part of that was being around spirit-filled people. Yeah. Because they were able to pray and they asked the Lord, what is the root? Because he'll tell you. He's like, what is the root? And he told them she's struggling with this. And so they prayed down heaven for me. They got that root. She was like shaking me and I was like, yeah, get it out, honestly. And so, but I walked away from there. I went home, and I kid you not, it was just like download of the assignment God gave me, and I was able to like do what He called me to do at like a supernatural pace. And it was because I didn't fear disappointment anymore. I was coming from the approval already.
When you're in that shame spiral, everything feels like it's the worst thing you could have ever done. But every single time, it's a perfect way for the enemy to trap you in that place, you know? Like if I can keep her silent and if I can tell her like, this will be the thing. Are you sure you want to say that? Like they're going to leave you. They're going to, and it's a perfect way to keep you isolated. But there's so much that comes with coming out of hiding and uncovering those things, whether it's a sin, a temptation, or if it's just like, I'm really freaking struggling with this anger. You know what I mean? Like whatever the thing is, it's the enemy's always going to try to use isolation because vulnerability creates freedom. And so, I think it's, that's like the familiar lie I always hear is like, no, don't share that. Just stay like, you can't share that with people. And every time you do, you're like,
with safe people, with safe people.
and the right people.
Yes. And that are walking with the Lord, I'll say, because you can get burned. Have wisdom and discernment with that.
Yeah.
But I'll say even how you know it's God's voice is He always calls you higher, and it brings you closer to Him because your heart is I just want to please you. I want to do whatever you ask. And so the condemnation, the shame is going to pull you away from God. It's going to make you feel like you're not good enough. It's going to I guess pull you away from the Lord. And so that's how you can kind of tell the difference of
it pulls you away from God and deeper into the shame.
Yeah. I recently just started the Bible in a Bible recap, and I was reading Genesis, and I know the story of Cain and Abel, but in this season, as I've been walking through anger at an like unimaginable level that I've ever experienced it, it's interesting because even as y'all were speaking, I recognize in the text that even Cain didn't respond to the Lord when He's talking to them. And in some ways we do that too, where God's like, sit with me, but we don't. And so it says, Cain brings his offering, and we know that God doesn't accept it. And He says to him, why are you angry? And why do you look sad and depressed and dejected? And it says that Cain is exceedingly angry and indignant, and he looked sad and depressed. And so the Lord responds to him and says, or doesn't respond to him because Cain doesn't respond. He says, if you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin crouches at your door. Its desire is for you, but you must master it. And what God showed me in this season I'm in is that, one, the Lord responded to his emotions and asked him, he literally asked him, what is it that's bothering you? Why do you look that way? Why do you feel that way? The same way we're talking about God opens this door for us to go to that place, but just like Cain, we too don't respond. We don't. And in the next verse, he kills his brother. And that's what I was so aware of, is that emotions uncontrolled and undealt with, they lead us to death. And maybe not physical death where we hurt somebody, but we hurt our relationships, we hurt ourselves, we hurt, just like you said, it was your family and your brother that was getting the worst of you. And that, just like he says, sin crouches, and it's your job to master it. Not that he doesn't empower us, but it's your job to take it to the prophets, get prayer, tell a friend, because the reality of it is we can't do it by ourselves. And I loved rereading this because I was so aware that Cain was controlled by his emotions, one, and two, by his circumstances, that he didn't do well. So that those feelings, like you said, of inadequacy, of feeling like I'm not enough, feeling like I can't control this, then God shows us where it leads to your demise of, he then killed his brother because he didn't get a hold of it. Yeah. And so it's just so interesting to me that in just the verse before, he would warn him of what happens when you don't. And then the next verse, it happens. And so for me, I was just so aware when I was walking through anger, I still am walking through anger, of how almost it just kept growing and growing. And it's like, y'all remember those chia? That's literally how, on the commercial you see how fast. That's for me how it was in December. I was struggling, just so weighted by anger. Like, and it wasn't just regular normal anger. It was unusual. Like, how can I want to hurt this person. I want to hurt myself. I want to hurt the living creatures and my dogs. Like the thoughts were so unusual. But it was the embarrassment of having them that kept me quiet about them, because I thought, surely if I say this, my friends will look at me different. Surely if I say this, the mom friends around me haven't gone through this and I'm going to be abnormal. If I voice this, I must not be Christian enough. And I obviously am not praying strong. There's secret sin. Something in my life is causing me to struggle with it this hard. And there was all these things that were coming up that I just kept trying to reason with why I'm experiencing what I'm experiencing, rather than just like you said, I was holding on to my pride. Then I wasn't getting my freedom. And I remember one day my son was existing in the house. We were and I just was staring at a wall. I could hear him asking for me. I could hear him, mommy, this. And I just was so checked out of like, how can I escape this? And what I recognized in that moment was I need help. Like, I need a friend to I need to just ask somebody if this is normal. And for me, as soon as I texted somebody, they were like, I went through that too. And it was just like you said, it's just like the awareness of like, oh my gosh, like it's not, yes, it is a big deal, but you realize when you have somebody else to go to, or people, when God tries to prompt you, like you need to get prayer, you need to share that thing. It's not because God wants to share our business. He's like, I know that in the releasing, there's going to be freedom that comes from it. And so I remember my go-to at that point was my doctor had already told me, I had already been telling her how bad I was struggling with my anger. And she had already said, I'll write you a prescription. It'll be on your file. If you need that prescription, you just make the call and it's filled. And I remember calling that day, getting the prescription filled, and just never going. And I remember just feeling so just feeling so conflicted about medication. And we say it all the time. There is actual things you do need medication for. There's actual things that like sometimes we can't do by ourselves. But for me, the wrestling was so strong that I just knew that I had to sit with it more before I went and filled that prescription. And so I kept sitting and I kept praying. And then obviously the next day I was angry again. And the quick, easy solution for me was get the medication. I kept hearing it's going to fix everything. You're going to be happier. Your family's going to love you more. But I just wasn't satisfied with that answer. And the weird thing is if you have a Bible app, then you know it sends you a verse of the day. And so the verse of the day on my husband's phone was something different, and mine was Psalm 143. And I thought that was so interesting because I was like, it's weird that his is one thing and then mine was a different thing. And so I opened it in my Bible, and it literally says the biblical prescription for depression. And I just had this awareness, and I wrote a note, I will get through this pregnancy unmedicated. And again, some people do need medication, but that for me was just, as I read through it, a strong conviction of mine of like God saying, you can get a hold of this, but you must master it. And you can master it. It's not by your might. It's through my spirit that you can do these things, but you got to come to me. And I realized I was going weeks and weeks and weeks trying to keep it myself, trying to keep it contained, trying to keep it controlled, trying to keep it hidden in secret, and realizing that the actual freedom was going to come when I released it, when I shared it, when I sat with it. And even still, like I'm still walking through it. But even the other day, I went to my appointment, and they had told me, when you come in for your next appointment, we're going to check how the medication was. And again, my verse of the day was Psalm 143, and it was different than my husband's. And I wrote another note that this is going to be the weapon that I use. This is going to be the prescription for this diagnosis of anger and depression that I'm feeling, that's going to get me through what I'm walking through. And so for me, it was just that reminder of God saying, hey, I'm still the prescription of the emotions that you're still dealing with, that I'm still walking through. And then what I realized too underneath the anger was the layer of depression of what you think God gives you these things. Like being pregnant is what I've always dreamed of, being married to my husband and our beautiful home, all these things you would think you should be happy. And it's embarrassing or it's shameful to say I'm really depressed with what my circumstances are, or getting to the root of what is the depression from. It's from the grief of it doesn't look like what I thought it would look like. It doesn't feel like what I thought it. I feel more than I thought. It's all these things, and the anger is the easy emotion to spew, to project at my husband, at my son. And the reality of it is it's this sadness, this deep sadness that, like, when it stays hidden, it's allowed to keep growing and growing and growing. And so for me too, like, anger is one of those things I've been walking through. But even as David is so honest with God and what he's saying, he even says, like, your spirit will lead me into a level country. Like, I just keep praying, God, lead me into a place where I'm level-headed. Because when you're angry, it's like just like you said, you don't see anything other than that emotion. And that's why God says, like, this is where it can lead you. And we see just how quickly it leads to death. And so for me, it's been an emotion that's it has the ability to be very scary because of what you realize you're capable of thinking, saying, feeling. But it's something that God's showing me. You have the ability, because I give you the ability to get freedom from it and to control it.
That's so good. You well said all of it. I even like how you say it's not by your might, but his strength. I think a lot of times when we are struggling, we don't realize it's pride keeping us from getting the Lord's strength, because we feel in ourselves, we're like, oh, well, I should know better, or I should not have these thoughts, or I should, whatever it may be, you feel like you can do it in your own strength. And I don't know if it's like we have to prove something or what it is in us, but the reality is when we truly surrender everything and, like, actually, I'm weak. I literally can't do anything without you. That's when we get to walk in his strength. And that's when we actually overcome all of the things that we have. Yeah. And I think it's in Matthew 5. It talks about, what is it?
Look it up? I'll get it.
Yeah. Me sitting here completely frozen. I'll try to. Let's see who gets there first.
Sword drill.
Dang it.
I'm in John.
Matthew 5.
Dang it.
The Beatitudes?
No. Oh, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. It's verse 3. Matthew 5:3. And it talks about that because blessed are the poor in spirit, meaning, like, you're admitting, like, I have nothing. And when you admit that, you're so humbly coming to the Lord that's when you're blessed, because you realize you can't do anything apart from him.
Yeah.
And so I think you just said that so beautifully, and
Proud of you.
I felt like I got revelation from it too.
Thank you. So proud of you.
Thank you.
I had an argument with somebody, and I was so angry that I didn't hear anything. I mean, I heard everything they said, but I didn't process any of it, because I was just like, yeah, I'm not receiving anything you just said, because I didn't like the delivery. I didn't agree with the delivery. And I sat with the Lord after I had time to calm down, and I sat with the Lord about it, and I was like, okay, Lord, like, I don't want this anger in my heart. Like, help me to forgive this person. Help me to see their perspective. Just help me in general, because I also don't want the hurtful words to sink into my heart. And so I was like, we were going strong, Lord. Like, I was on a high. We just got this root out. I don't want this to sink in, you know? So I was trying to deal with it before it dealt with me. But anyway, so I was sitting in it, and the Lord asked me a question, and it hit me hard. He said, just because the delivery wasn't good doesn't mean everything in the package was bad. And I said, ouch. Gosh. And so then he's like, sit with me and let me tell you what parts were true. Not that they weren't given in the most loving way, but let me show you the parts that actually you could grow in, and let it be something that, like, am I humble enough to allow the Lord shape me, even if I didn't like the delivery?
It's really good.
That's good.
And so I said, am I humble enough? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
I want freedom, or do I want to keep my pride?
Yeah. No, and so I do know, because I can see, like, there are things I'm like, actually, yeah, that would probably be beneficial just in general in my life. If I would take in this phrase or whatever it may be, then I can see how that would add value to my life. And so am I going to allow the hurt of the delivery keep me from growing in that?
That's really good.
God recently just had me forgive a person that wounded me like 6 years ago. And in my head, I'm like, well, why didn't I deal with that like 6 years ago? But I'm thankful to have dealt with it now and, or this last year. And I felt like I learned so much more from that experience. I had like a very clear view of what I did wrong with that relationship. And so I think different seasons of our lives as we grow with God, you become aware even of like I'm talking about within like relational, I guess, dysfunction or disagreements, but you become, as you mature with the Lord, more aware of like, so I did, like, I can
played a part.
Yeah, I played a part in this. Whereas when things first, it's kind of like what you were saying, like essentially what can I learn from this? And so I think, the more you grow with God, the more you kind of start realizing it's not, I'm not the victim as much as I think that I am.
Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah. I think too, it's interesting how when the Lord brings something back up, and you have to go through that next level of healing. At first, you're so like, I don't want to do that. I'm tired of going through that. I'm just going to leave it to the side. But it's interesting how much freedom you didn't even realize you needed.
And had access to.
Yeah. And so I'm like, dang, you should have told me that a week ago. He's like, I did.